The world had changed overnight. The dead no longer stayed dead, rising from their graves to wander the streets in search of flesh. It was a nightmare come to life, and no one knew how to stop it. For the Smith family, the nightmare began when their patriarch, George, rose from his grave. They had buried him just a few days prior, after a sudden heart attack had taken his life. But now he was back, his skin gray and his eyes empty. At first, the family thought it was some kind of sick joke. But as more and more of their loved ones rose from their graves, they realized that something was terribly wrong. The Smiths barricaded themselves inside their home, trying to stay safe from the hordes of undead that roamed the streets. They could hear them scratching at the doors and windows, moaning and groaning in hunger. For days, the family huddled together, rationing their food and water and waiting for the authorities to come and save them. But no help ever came. As the days turned into weeks, the family began to realize that they were on their own. They had to find a way to survive in a world where the dead had risen from their graves. They started to fortify their home, boarding up the windows and doors and setting up traps for the undead. They scavenged for supplies, risking their lives to find food and water in abandoned stores and homes. But the hardest part was dealing with their own loved ones who had turned into monsters. The Smiths had to face the painful reality that they could no longer trust the people they had once loved. They had to make the difficult decision to put down their own family members, to protect themselves and each other. The Smiths struggled to survive, but they never lost hope. They knew that somewhere out there had to be a way to stop the undead and restore order to the world. They had to keep fighting, for their own survival and for the survival of humanity. And so they continued to band together, to hold on to their love for each other and to fight for a better tomorrow. In a world where the dead refused to stay dead, the Smith family refused to give up on life. Despite their best efforts, the Smiths soon found themselves running out of supplies. The streets were too dangerous to venture out into, and their home was no longer safe from the hordes of undead that surrounded them. They knew they had to leave, to find a safer place to survive. So, with heavy hearts, they gathered what little supplies they had left and set out on foot. It was a dangerous journey, filled with close calls and moments of despair. They saw horrors that they never could have imagined before, as the undead roamed freely and attacked anyone in their path. But the Smiths persevered, relying on each other for support and strength. They traveled for days, until they finally stumbled upon a small community of survivors. The community was led by a man named John, who had managed to keep his people safe by fortifying their homes and creating a system of trade and cooperation. The Smiths were welcomed with open arms, grateful to finally find a safe haven in this world of the undead. Together, they worked to rebuild and fortify their community, knowing that they were not out of danger yet. But for the first time since the nightmare began, the Smiths felt a glimmer of hope. As they sat around the campfire, listening to John's tales of survival and triumph, the Smiths knew that they had made the right choice. They had left behind their old lives, their old world, and had found a new family in this community of survivors. And though they would never forget the horrors they had faced, the Smiths knew that they were stronger for it. They had learned to adapt and survive in a world that had been turned upside down, and they would do whatever it takes to keep their new family safe. For in this world where the dead refuse to stay dead, the living must cling to each other and fight for every precious moment of life.